In this video, I'm going to discuss 6 techniques that you can use to fix issues with your wood floor without hiring a professional. You can use these to resolve problems like deep scratches or cracks, or even things like problems with your finish. So you have puddles in your finish, or droplets on your finish, or dry spots that you might be seeing. And some of these techniques are also useful for resolving issues like cupping boards, bowling boards, or even gaps between your floorboards. So without further ado, let's dig in. So the first technique that we have is using stain markers and wood filler. These are very good at filling in any kind of scratches or cracks that you might be seeing in your floor. So say that you've got a dark brown floor and you move some furniture, move some appliances, and you let scratches on your floor. That dust has gotten in, so another bright white scratches against your nice brown floor. That is when you want to bust out a stain marker to fill in that scratch. Again, though, these kind of make the scratch disappear. They don't really heal the scratch. So you go put your finger against the surface of the floor, you'll still feel it, but it can mask the problem. You can also use wood filler to fill in any kind of nail holes or cracks that might exist in your floor, especially around the perimeter of your floor. So say you got some new base shoe installed, and when they're putting in the brads, the force of that effort will often cause cracks in your boards. You can use this to fix those cracks. So you can find these pretty much in any home improvement store. We generally use Minwax for our product lineup, and they're very common and very easy to use. Now, the next series of techniques that we have are buffing out the floor for an oil floor, buffing out the floor for a hybrid floor, or using a sand and coat technique, which you can use for a water-based finish or really any kind of finish. So oil and hybrid too. But before we dive into that, let's go into a different types of finish that you might see on your floor, because that can really determine what's the best technique for you. So first off, there are basically 4 types of finish, maybe 5 or 6 if you really go into it, but there's 4 that are most commonly seen. So the first is an oil finish. The next is a water-based finish. Third, we have a hybrid finish, which is kind of a combination of both oil and water. Has the strengths of both of them and none of the weaknesses. And then there is a aluminum oxide finish, which you ordinarily see on a pre-finished floor. With the aluminum oxide finish that you see on a pre-finished floor, I will tell you right now, is incredibly hard to work with. It's generally impossible to repair. So there'll be a whole separate video about how to identify a pre-finished floor, what to do in that scenario. I'll just be very honest with you and tell you, if you have a pre-finished floor, you're probably going to want to hire a professional right away, because that finish is incredibly hard. It's incredibly difficult to work with. Besides using stain pens to kind of fill in any kind of scratches and gaps or whatever, you generally require serious professional equipment to work with that kind of floor. However, the oil finish, the water-based finish, and the hybrid finish are the most common ones that you'll see out there. So there are a series of questions you can ask yourself to really determine which finish you have on your floor. So the first off is the age. So when was the floor last done? If your floor hasn't been refinished in 20, 30 years, you probably have an oil finish on your floor. That is the oldest, that is the most common, that was probably what was used at that time. If your floor was finished in the last 15, 20 years, there's a possibility that you have a water-based finish. And if the floor was refinished in the last 2 to 5 years, you possibly have a hybrid finish. It is much newer, it's also a bit rare. So the odds of you having issues with a hybrid finish at this point are still pretty unlikely. And unless you were there when your floor was refinished and your floor refinishing company told you that they use a hybrid finish, you probably don't have it. That is one option that's out there. So another question you can go and ask yourself to figure out what kind of finish that you have is, what is the hue of it? So oil finishes tend to turn yellow or amber over time. And an easy way to go out and see this is to go compare the brightest part of a room with the darkest part of a room. So you have a sunroom and you have a closet. Just compare the wood in those 2 different spaces. Or if you have a rug that you haven't moved for a while, just pull up that rug and see what the color is of the exposed area versus the unexposed area. The brighter the area, the more exposed it has been to sunlight and to the elements, the yellower or the more amber it will be. This also works as well for a water-based finish. So water-based finishes tend to go out and turn the wood white over time because the water in the finish will actually cause it to bleach out. So you go look at the brightest part of the room versus the darkest, you will actually see that the wood in the brightest part of the room is whiter because of those bleaching agents. Another thing you can go out and do to tell your finishes apart is to go look at the clarity of the finish. So an oil finish will be crystal clear from day one until the end. You'll be able to see your grain perfectly through it, even if it has an amber color. Now with a water-based finish, however, the clarity tends to drop over time. It tends to turn milky. It tends to have kind of plastic sheen over time. So when you're looking at your floorboards, there'll seem to be a film between you and the board. And that's one way you can go out and tell if you have an oil finish or a water-based finish. And then finally, what you can do is to go look at the sheen of your floor. So oil finishes tend to be satin, semi-gloss, or gloss. And a water-based finish or a hybrid finish generally tends to have a matter, duller appearance. So if you go look at your floor and it's very glossy, you probably have an oil finish. Or if you go look at your floor and it has a matte sheen, there is no real light bouncing off that floor, it's a pretty good chance that you have a water finish or a hybrid finish. So with that now being determined, let's go through the techniques you can use to fix these floors. So if you happen to have a oil-based finish, you can simply use a tennis ball or a rag to fix scratches in your floor. You simply wipe it down or scrub it against your floor very hard, and the friction and heat from that scrubbing action will cause the oil to melt and to flow together and to kind of fill in those scratches. So again, unlike a stain marker, which just kind of makes the scratches disappear, this will actually heal the scratches that exist in your floor. Now, if you have a hybrid finish, you can also go and use a magic eraser instead of a tennis ball or a rag. Now, one issue with a hybrid finish and using this magic eraser is that hybrid finishes are, they're matte. They're a very flat color. And using this magic eraser will cause them to be shinier than they normally are. Now, over a period of time, as you walk on the floor, that extra bit of shininess will go down and it'll return to that matte sheen that you want. But just be aware that when you use this technique of using a magic eraser to buff out a hybrid finish, that is a side effect that you will see. Now, the next technique that you can use to fix a wood floor, and this works for all finishes, but you definitely need to use this for a water-based finish. It is harder to repair. It's one of the weaknesses of having a water-based finish is a sand and coat technique. I do want to have a caveat though with this technique. This is one that we use as professionals to do touch-ups on floors, but if you are too aggressive with this, you can make problems worse. And you will see why as we go through it. But just be aware, you gotta be very careful with this. Use this at your own risk. So what we do here is first we've got to identify a issue you have on your floor. And we go find a board that's, that problem is located on. We basically tape up the individual floorboard that is has a problem. We then go out and use a piece of sandpaper, a pretty high grit. This one here is 240. We then scratch up that board in the direction of the grain. This goes out and creates an easier surface for the finish to bond to, and we always do that. Next, what we go out and do is if we are dealing with an issue like a puddle of finish on the floor, or there's droplets of finish, you can go out and use a scraper to get down to a level surface. You can find these pretty much everywhere in like a Home Depot or Menards or your local home improvement store, in the tile or the painting department. So these are pretty common. We have a distributor that we go through for ours, but they're not hard to find. And you can then basically apply this to your floor to scrape it down to a level surface. We generally encourage you though to kind of go in a 360-degree motion around that trouble area so that you don't go out and gouge your floor. This is something that you gotta be very careful with. If you only scratch in one direction, you can cause gouges in your floor. If you go out and you scrape too hard or too long and there's a stain on your floor, you can get down to raw wood, you can burn through your stain, scrape through your stain, and again, you'll have a worse appearance than it started out with. So again, this is where that caveat comes in. Be very careful when you are scraping your floor because you can cause a lot of damage to it. So after we've sanded this floor down, after we've scraped it down, we then use a tack cloth and a vacuum, pick up any dust that exists on this board to kind of create a clean surface for the finish to stick to. And so we don't see any dust in that finish. So it's crystal clear again. We then go and to the finish that we want to use. So if we have a oil-based finish, you go out and use a China bristle brush to apply the finish to that board. Again, any direction of the grain so that it doesn't appear incongruous with the rest of the board that you have. So again, brush any direction of the grain. Or if you happen to have a water-based finish or a hybrid finish, you'll go out and have an applicator pad that you can go out and dribble that finish onto. You then apply that pad across this board that you're trying to fix to, again, in the same direction as a grain. You want to make sure that when you're applying the finish with a water-based finish or a hybrid finish, that you're doing it, make sure that finish is pretty thick, because otherwise you'll get some dry spots and some streaks as a result, just because of how thin it is and how fast it dries out. Another thing to know here, when you are working with a water-based finish or a hybrid finish, you definitely want to shake that bottle before you use it, because all of the agents in the finish that give it that matte sheen tend to sink to the bottom. And if you don't go out and shake that bottle up, that will make the finish appear shinier than the rest of the floor that you have. So definitely make sure that you shake that bottle before you use it. And do not shake an oil can if you have an oil finish. That will add oxygen to the finish. You'll get more bubbles than you want to have. It should be nice and smooth and flat. And shaking an oil finish, putting oxygen in there will not help that. And then once you've gone out and you've applied your finished product to the floor, we then go out and peel off the tape. And you want to do this because the next layer of finish that you're applying will be a few millimeters thicker than your currently existing finish. And if you want that to flatten out, so you don't have any kind of ridges in your finish, any ridges in your floor, you want to peel off this tape before it dries. Also important to know when you're peeling off this tape is that you really want to go out and peel it away from the finish. So don't peel it up flat. Don't peel it up over the finish. Peel the tape up away from the finish. So there's any kind of dust on the tape that it will not land in the finish and again cause a bumpy and irregular surface that you don't want. So you just go up and peel off that tape like so. Again, just peel away from the board that's touching up. What we then like to go out and do is tear up some small pieces of this tape and just mark off the sides of the board that we were working on, just so people know that this board has been touched up and that no one should go walk on it for a while. So with a oil floor, we touch up. You generally can't walk on it for about 12 hours afterwards, maybe 8 to 12, but again, half a day at least, you pretty much can't walk on that board. And if you're doing a water-based finish touch-up or a hybrid finish touch-up, you probably want to stay off of it for at least 2 to 4 hours, but it's a lot faster than the oil finish. So with that, that is how you go out and you do a sand and coat. This is what we go out and do ourselves after we finish a floor. So we go into a home, we see if there's any areas need to get touched up, and we then isolate those boards and do a sand and coat to fix any problems that we go out and see. But again, you can be too aggressive with this, so it's very important that you're very careful. You don't go too fast. You don't go too hard. Just do the bare minimum that you need to do to fix the issue that you see. Because once you go down too hard, again, you can gouge the board. You can scrape down to the raw wood. And it can create an appearance that you don't want to have in the final product. So the fifth technique that we have is something that you can use if you're seeing some localized water damage on your floor, in particular cupping. So let's say that you had a leak in your dishwasher or your fridge or your sink. It's gone on the floor and you're seeing the boards cup as a result. The water has gone underneath the floorboard. The bottom is wetter than the sides. It is pushing out as a result because when wood is wet, it expands. So it pushes out and it creates that cupping effect between the boards. You can fix this if you are fast by bringing out some fans and a dehumidifier to really dry out that area. So bring that equipment in, let it run on that area where the water was present, and let it go for about a week. And after a week, you should really see the cupping go away and have a flat, level surface again. If that doesn't go away, then it's possibly still water underneath the floor, or the wood has been too warped to return back to normal. And that is when you bring in a professional. And our last technique that we can use to really fix wood floors is controlling the environment in the home. So the actual climate that you have. So one thing that you can see with your floors is cupping, bowing, and gapping between the floorboards. So even aside of just localized, water damage causing cupping, if you happen to have a really damp home, that can cause cupping and bowing as well. So what do I mean by climate control? So essentially, your home has a climate, which we actually measure by a unit called relative humidity. So you probably hear this really used in weather reports a lot, but it can also apply to your home as well. And relative humidity is basically a measure of how much water is in the air. So it goes from 0 to 100%, 100% being that your house basically has a cloud in it, there is fog in it, it's going to rain any given time, and 0 being a desert-like environment. And relative humidity is a relative measure. It changes based off temperature. So the hotter it is, the more water the air can hold, and the colder it is, the less water that air can hold. And in general, humans, us, we are really comfortable in an environment where relative humidity is between 30% and 50%. And it turns out this is true for your floor as well. So we want to go out and get your environment to the ideal state. And if it's in that ideal state, you should not go out and see any issues with cupping, bowing, or gaps in your floor. So how do we do this? So to control relative humidity in your home, you will basically need 3 tools. Well, 2 tools, maybe 3 if you want to get really fancy and technical with it. So the first tool that you need is a thermometer or thermostat for your home, just to know how hot it is. Again, relative humidity is relative. So you need to figure out how hot your home is to really get a baseline what the humidity level should be. The next tool that you want is a hygrometer. So you can, or a humidity gauge is another term for it. And you can find this pretty much anywhere. Find them on Amazon. It may range from $10 to $500, depending on how fancy of a model you want to get. And that will go out I'll go out and tell you what the humidity level is in your home from 0% to 100%. And then the last tool that you can get, it's kind of optional, and that is a moisture meter. Again, you can find these pretty much anywhere. They range from $10 to $500, again, depending on how fancy you want to get. And ideally, you would get a model where you can actually choose the wood species that you are measuring, because different wood species act differently in the same environment. So that's kind of important at a more technical level, but it's not absolutely necessary to have. Now, next, we're going to go out and go through a matrix here of measurements so you can kind of understand how to really analyze and think about relative humidity in your home. So I'm going to show you a matrix here. And this will basically show you on one axis the temperature that is in your home. And in the next axis, it will show you relative humidity level in your home. And in the middle, you will see a kind of green box. And this shows you the ideal state that you want to have your wood floors in. So once you know the temperature of your home, once you know the relative humidity of your home, you should be able to kind of guesstimate what the moisture level is for your floor. And if you are too high, so your home is too damp, your relative humidity level is 55, 60, 65, this is when you might see some cupping or bowing in your floor. You want to go out and run your furnace for a while. You want to run a dehumidifier in your space for a while. And that should go out and bring the relative humidity level back to normal. You should see your boards return to normal too as a result. Now, if the relative humidity level in your home is too low, so it's 15%, 20%, 25%, this is when you'll go out and see the board start to shrink. This is when you'll see some gaps appear between your floorboards. In this situation, you want to go and turn on a humidifier or boil some water on the stove, get some more water in that air. Or if you have the money, you can go get a whole home humidifier attached to your furnace and go control humidity levels through that. So then again, once you go put more moisture in the air, you should get to the normal relative humidity levels. You should see the boards expand and those gaps disappear in your floor. Now, where the moisture meter comes in handy is when you see some really unusual behavior. So you've gone out and you set your temperature in your home to a normal level. The humidity level is also in a normal range from 30 to 50%, and your floor is still doing weird things. It's still cupping, it's still bowing. This is when it's helpful to go pull out that moisture meter to go out and just see what is the moisture level of that board. It's possible that you have other issues going on in your home, something, you got moisture that's coming out of a dishwasher or a fridge, so you got a leak that you don't know about, or you've got moisture issues that are being caused by bad ventilation in your basement, or you have stucco on your home, for example. It can also cause moisture to really cause your home to be a lot damper than normal. So having that moisture meter to really help you just be clear about, is the moisture content level of my board normal given the other conditions that are going on? And if it's not normal, in what direction is it not normal? And if you see this issue, this is probably a case where we want to call professionals to troubleshoot and diagnose what is going on. Because you want somebody who has a bit more experience just to really think through what are the factors that are at play in your home and different systems that are involved in your home's environment and what is going on with your floor. So that is what you can do to really control relative humidity levels in your home to avoid some of the worst issues you might see with seasonal wood movement, cupping, or bowing. So there you have it. Those are 6 ways you can fix problems with your wood floors without calling in a professional. In our next video, we're going to review the problems that are severe enough where you really do need to call in a pro. I hope you found this video informative. I hope you found it helpful. If you have any questions or comments for us, please give us a call at 952-445-5062 or email us at support@uppieswoodfloors.com. Thank you and have a great day.